So this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the online interim solution for drama and communication skills. At the outset, I want to make this very clear that this is a solution that applies for June and July 2020 only. Okay, so that's why we call this an interim solution. The good news is that online is here to stay. In view of the recent situation around the world, we felt the need to develop online assessments in the interim as well as in the long term. But in the interim, and that's the solution we're talking about today, it was mainly because we have a lot of students who are stuck in between, either in the process of completing a level or an exam, or couldn't complete an exam, or are going abroad for higher studies and needed to complete certain levels of qualifications. So hence we have the interim solution, which is for June and July. And from August onwards, we will have a whole new suite of digital assessments also. I'm using the word also because the in-person assessments will also be there and will always be the mainstay. But the digital assessments is a new option available for many who perhaps are in areas that Trinity does not have ground support per se. So the new way forward is to have digital assessments. And sometime around the last week of July, we will be able to share with you all those details. It's currently a work in progress. So on that note, this afternoon, we will be spending time looking at three things. One is, of course, the modifications that have to be made in the light of it becoming an online assessment. So there are two types of modifications that happen to the syllabus as well as to the assessments. And after that, I will take you through the procedural modifications, which involve the operations and how do you register, how do you pay, how do you record, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, I would share with you some guidance on how to be able to do these things. And finally, of course, very gladly, we'll take care of all the questions as well. So part one, we're now looking at the syllabus modifications. The first and most important thing to know over here is that all these syllabi are for individual entries only. These are only for individual exams. As you can imagine, with social distancing and quarantining happening the world over, it's impossible to do pair assessments right now or to do group assessments right now. So for now, the interim solution only paves the way for individual candidates. It covers speech and drama, performing text and acting, communication skills, performance arts, and musical theater. Now, on a side note, I want to mention to you that the acting and speaking syllabus of 2017 and the communication skills 2010 syllabus have been given an extension in the overlapping period and will continue till May 31st, 2021. So this is in the case of in-person assessments as well. Okay, so this is an important side note, which is why I've put it on the side over there. For the purpose of these assessments, we have all grades from initial to 8. I thought it worthy to point out that we also have the professional certificates still being valid in communication skills, since there is an extension of the validity till the 31st of May. And of course, you can also do your diplomas related to performance, not the teaching diplomas and not the FTCL. So only the performance diplomas, it's the ATCL and the LTCL. Now, during the course of this entire interim period, there are very dedicated syllabi which would have the term adapted emblazoned right across the front face of the page. So these are what they look like. You can download them also on the link that I've highlighted to you. And each of them have their own guidelines for the interim solution. So you have communication skills, and since I mentioned the 2010 syllabus is being extended and with the 2019 syllabus, you now will get both of those as options in the adapted syllabus. And so you also have a common booklet for speech and drama and performing text, and booklet for musical theatre, one for performance arts, and for the diplomas and acting as well. Now, just to look at what the inside of any of these look like, I've chosen the example of the communication skills. So this is the adapted syllabus available just for this interim period. And as you can see, it covers both the 2010 version as well as the 2019 version. A look at speech and drama and acting. If you're looking very closely at the initial grade of speech and drama, you'll realize that there are 2 tasks written over there, and the total of that comes up to 80 and not 100. So before you think that what happened to the other 20, well, we've had to make a few adaptations and modifications over here. So what we've done is we've designed 2 types of assessments. One that we call calculated assessments, and the other that we call adapted assessments. Calculated assessments, wherein there are 2 steps. Step 1 involves a candidate recording the first 2 or 3 performance-related tasks of their grade or their exam. To give you an example, in speech and drama, you usually have a prose passage, a poem, and maybe a mime. So, and thereafter you would probably have a sight reading prose passage and a discussion with the examiner on the meaning of the pieces or the mood of the pieces or on voice control and so on. So in this particular case, a candidate will record only their first 3 pieces, which are the performance pieces. It must be recorded in one continuous go, and I will explain that a little later as well. And when that's uploaded to our portal, it thereafter is marked remotely by an examiner. But now, because we cannot do the interactive element on site, what Trinity has been able to do, and do it with 100% accuracy, is be able to predict what the balance score would be based on an algorithm which factors several things. So Trinity will complete your balance marking schemes based on how the student performed, and then run that data according to the past history of how students have performed. This is how we calculate the results. So Trinity, and this was what also makes Trinity very unique, is our assessments carry something known as the construct coverage. So this means that within the performance component of the exam, many or all of the skills usually tested through the supporting tests are also demonstrated within the pieces. So for instance, when someone does a sight reading piece, which is where the examiner chooses the prose passage, in a case like this, the candidate has already done in an earlier task their prose extract. So we test it in sometimes 2 different ways, but the skill is still inherent. So this is also done partly due to the way the examination criteria are constructed to consider performance skills as implicitly demonstrated within all the components of the exam. Okay. Now, stemming from this, and to explain how this algorithm was built, there are a lot of statistics that are being used in this. And these statistics involve the analysis of historical data by geography, by syllabus, by grade. Excuse me. It also includes our live validation database, in which we can identify trends in the results data. And of course, we have our own ongoing and regular examiner standardization activities. So all these factors put together form an algorithm which helps Trinity be able to complete the remainder of the marking scheme, which could be anywhere between 20 to 40 marks. All right. So it's important that we understand this in lieu of the circumstances that we have. So when this score is then taken and aggregated out, although you might think that you're appearing for only 60 marks or 40 marks, Trinity is scoring the balance to be able to give you a score scale from 0 to 100, and to factor all your tasks that you performed and the interactive ones, which we were able to surmise from based on your performance and based on historical data. So which assessments are covered? So this methodology will apply to musical theatre, performance arts, acting, performing text and speech and drama, and it covers grades initial to 8. The other type of assessment is the adapted assessments. And in this particular case, there are again 2 steps, except that in step 1, it involves the candidate, where they record the entire length of the exam. All right, so this is now not a truncated part to just your performance pieces. You record the entire exam. But, for instance, in the case of communication skills, there are certain elements that require the examiner to interact with the candidate, perhaps after each task. So this is where the teacher will now facilitate that role and will ask questions and help the candidate bring out their best through the interactive questions that are normally asked. But this will be done by them, and it can be done while the recording is going on of the entire exam, either in person, if the teacher and candidate are in the same room, or it could be done even remotely, where the teacher is asking questions to the candidate as part of a broadcast technology or a Zoom call or a Skype call. Or it could also be where the teacher just asks the question in a voiceover and the student responds to that. But in this kind of assessment, we are recording the whole exam, including the teacher's involvement, and keeping in mind that the teacher is facilitating those questions on behalf of the examiner. Now, I'm sure you have a lot of questions over here, particularly with communication skills in regard to what kind of stimulus must you offer the candidate and what happens in the case of impromptu tasks where the candidate has been given the stimulus 15 minutes before. So I will come to that in a little while. Now, the adapted assessments basically apply to communication skills as a subject completely. In addition to that, there is also the ATCLs and the LTCLs, which follows this methodology, and I will talk about that also a little later. Our theory exam, unfortunately, as you can understand, and this applies only for those doing the LTCL in performing or the AT and LTCL in teaching, where normally you would have a written paper. So this year, unfortunately, we could not do that written paper in May, but we're looking forward to doing it in November. In fact, we will be having 2 dates in November with perhaps a 3rd additional date for February. So if you are a teacher and you've already got your work lined up and you've got your students in the pipeline, please don't halt, all right? We are already factoring several various dates to be able to accommodate all of the backlog that may have occurred in this area. But moving from here, so that leaves us with what are your options right now? Option 1 is if you are time bound and you would like to do an assessment, you've already got candidates who've not completed assessments, or you have got candidates who are ready to go to the next level, then you can look at the Interim Digital Solution, which is applicable till the 17th of July. I say 17th of July because that's the cutoff date for registration. And by the end of July, that's the 31st, all formalities need to be completed with regard to the upload and so on, which I will talk about in a minute. But this is ideal for candidates who are either in between or already prepared. And most importantly, this brings out newer alternatives to tasks and will also even indicate to you perhaps what the future of digital assessments will look like in Trinity. Now, like I mentioned earlier, from August, we will have full-fledged digital assessments. And so this is going to become very convenient because as much as many people enjoy the face-to-face element of the Trinity exam, there are still very many who ask for the digital alternative. And there are very many places where we have potential candidates who could not be a part of this because either we do not have an on-ground presence, but now they can very much do these kind of assessments. And even for teachers, this becomes a unique opportunity to be able to reach out and teach students who may not necessarily be in your own city or center. So this going forward is a new option, all right? But of course, as soon as possible, we will resume all in-person assessments. Now, I'm sure you understand the intricacies of this situation because this not just involves a lot of people, health concerns, but it involves governments and policy and so on and so forth. So just as soon as we can resume, we will. To some extent, and this is just to give you some information, we've already resumed some element of our exams in different parts of the world. So just as soon as things ease up a little bit in India, and policy changes and guidelines also work in favor of all in-person assessments, then we will resume that as well. But the digital assessments will also continue to be an existing option. We now look at part 2. So I've spoken with you thus far about all the assessment modifications and the syllabus modifications, but now let's look at how do you comply with procedure, what needs to happen, how, when, which, where, and so on. So step 1 is register. So the dates for registration for the interim solution, the last date is the 17th of July. And the reason why it is the 17th of July is because the last date of upload is the 31st of July. And usually it would take about 14 days, within which time you will receive, after registering, you will receive a username and a password which directs you to the Trinity server, where you will post your recorded link and upload the same. So the date to keep in mind is 17th July is your last date for registration. And within the next 14 days, you will definitely have to present or upload your performed material. Now, this is the last one is for those applying for UCAS points. As you would know, many students going abroad and even perhaps pursuing higher education take advantage of the UCAS points, which is the University College Admission Services points. If you are applying for that in this session, then you need to fill in your registration by tomorrow. And I'm sorry to put a rush on that, but that's because it will affect your results coming out a little later. So the last date is the 25th of June, and the last upload is the 10th of July for those interested in availing of the UCAS points for grades 6 to 8 of any of the Trinity syllabus assessments. Which brings me to the process of how do you register. So all your entries are to be submitted via email to your local customer support office. There is a format, and they will share that with you, wherein you can enter all your details. Candidates now also have the choice to choose whether they would like to opt for the digital solution. So if you've already paid for an assessment and you've all this while were not able to complete it, well, then now you have the opportunity to complete that assessment. While registering, all candidates must provide an individual email ID. However, if you are a school, a drama school, then you can just provide your email ID, all right? And we will communicate, or Trinity College London directly will communicate with you, and you can disseminate the information there onwards to each individual student of yours. Moving forward from there, payment. So this is a great news for everyone. There have been questions for some time about online payments. So we're happy to say now that we've made this happen. It's not a one bank code fits everybody. There are different parts of the country involved. So please reach out to your local customer support office. They will give you the relevant NEFT, RTGS, IFSC codes for you to be able to make online payments. And we also understand that in these circumstances, moving about is a bit of a challenge. So this should greatly help. As regards the fee structures, it remains the same for 2020 and 2021. Which is, of course, I think has already been circulated at the start of the year a few months ago. We now look at the second part over here, which is the performance element. If you are doing a calculated assessment, which means if you're doing an exam in speech and drama, performing text, musical theater, performance arts, acting, then you need to look at this. We need a filmed performance of only your performance pieces as per the time that is given in the interim or the adapted syllabus. This recording needs to be in one complete take. Okay, I will stress on this a little later as well, but it needs to be one complete segment of the 2 or the 3 tasks that that respective grade advises you to do. If you're doing an adapted performance, like in the case of communication skills, then we need a filmed performance of your entire exam with the teacher interaction as per the timings and the guidance given in the adapted syllabus. All right. Moving from there, how to record. Okay, so this is interesting. You have the flexibility now of recording at home or with your teacher, if you can have that happen, or with your teacher online and you physically performing. And of course, at your school. This may still be a limitation for several candidates and teachers in the country, but if you do have this option, you still continue to have it. Important note over here, your performance, like I mentioned earlier, should be in one continuous take. Please do not edit or join separate performance pieces. All right. So you may do as many recordings as you want, but it all has to be of the 3 pieces or 2 pieces in one straight stretch. You may do 10, 12 recordings and then choose which recording you feel does the most justice to you and choose to upload that one. Okay. We have some very detailed filming guidelines as well on the website, and I will highlight some of them going forward. Which brings me now to the stage of after you've recorded, how do you upload? So after you register, you will be given within 14 days, you will receive a username and a password and a link to a Trinity server. Within those 14 days, once you've recorded your pieces, you will then click on that link and your username and password. It's already been pre-assigned since we know your grade that you're entering for. So there will be that many relevant boxes into which you will upload your material. So the first thing that you will upload is your performance pieces or the whole exam, depending on which subject you're doing. And the second thing you will then do is you will upload a Word document or a PDF of the performance pieces. So if, for instance, you were doing a prose passage or a poem, normally you would carry this into the room and share this with the examiner. Well, here you will upload it while you are uploading your video as well. Since we are recording and since there is filmed recordings involved, we must have a parental consent form for candidates below the age of 16. Now, this is for various reasons, most of which is compliance and the fact that in accordance with the law, we need to keep this guideline in place. So the parents would need to sign off on that form and you will upload it as part of the upload process. Now, in case, and this might apply to some candidates, if you have a letter that notifies the examiner of any special needs or any other special affordings to you for your circumstance, then you must please upload that letter also in the format that you have. Please ensure that there is your full name, your subject, and your grade. So if, for instance, you write it as John T. Smith, Speech and Drama 6, okay? Like I mentioned earlier, you upload it using your username and password that will be provided by Trinity. Now, after you've uploaded your video file, please do not delete it until you've received your feedback report and your certificate from Trinity. And the reason why we say this is because sometimes something could go wrong in the upload process, or perhaps you wish to have the result re-examined, in which case you would need to please keep that recording available for the future as well. Once all of this is done and you've completed your upload, you will receive an on-screen intimation which tells you that it's been successful. And thereafter, in the due course of time, you will receive your examination report, just like you always did in an in-person exam. And you will also receive the certificate from Trinity College London. And this is a completely identical certificate to the one that you would have gotten if you did an in-person exam. So nowhere on the certificates that we mention in-person or online exam. And I want to go one further and say that all these exams are completely regulated by Ofqual and completely compliant as well. So In no way, because you are doing an online assessment, does it decrease the value of your assessment. It just makes it more convenient. But that is why we also took a little time to ensure that we keep in mind every requirement of Ofqual to make sure that this exam was just as it promises in terms of coverage, in terms of depth, in terms of skills assessed, to ensure that you're getting a full-fledged qualification at the end of this assessment process. I'm now on my third part, which is the guidance element that I spoke about earlier. And I mentioned this earlier where I gave you the example of communication skills grade 8. And I said perhaps there is a situation where the examiner normally gives a task to a candidate 15 minutes prior. Or for instance, in a grade 6, where you're applying for a job or a position in an interview, and there need to be some questions to be asked. Well, for that purpose, we've developed an entire adapted guidance just for teachers so that they can understand what kind of questions could they ask. Remember, Trinity has always believed in spontaneity, has always required a certain element of thinking on your feet. So this is only a guidance, all right? It is meant to bring out the best from a candidate and still keep true to all the tasks and skills that we look to assess. So this is a guidance to help teachers for that. Now, there's also an interesting development if you're doing the LTCLs in performing. Ordinarily, you would have a Unit 1 paper, which is a theoretical paper, which you would normally write for 2.5 hours. Well, under these circumstances, you've been given the flexibility where we've shared the questions with you, and you can record your entire answer through a video like we are doing, or like you would do for any other performance. And you can thereafter upload that video, and it will be as good as you appearing for a written exam. So these are the two guidances available there. I mean, let's look at the filming guidance and what kind of a room and the details over there. So the room should be quiet with no external noises. It should be well lit. The candidate should be facing the light. Please avoid any bright light behind you. Mobile phones should be on an airplane mode. You don't want a message or a mail interrupting the recording. If your performance includes movement, please make sure you stay in frame during the entire performance. And if you're using props or costumes, that they do not obstruct your presentation unnecessarily. Please ensure that your performance space is large enough for any movement involved in your piece. With regards to the devices that you may use, so you can use any good quality smartphone or tablet or any good audiovisual recording device. We encourage the use of a tripod for stability, but if you do not have access to one, please, you can just keep your device completely still on a steady surface for the duration of the exam. The camera should ideally be placed at an eye level where possible. Regarding your eye line, think of the recording device as if it was the examiner, and look down the lens if you wanted to make eye contact with the examiner. So these are some guidelines with regards to the devices. With regards settings, remember that the submitted performance video has to be one continuous take, all right, without editing separate tasks together. To ensure the final video size can be managed by our online platform, please lower your recording quality before you begin to record. Okay, so you can turn off the HD function, or if you want, you can record in HD, but when you're saving your file, please export it and compress it to anything between 480 to 720p. We do not need 4K quality. We just need anything close to a good enough recording, which ideally should be 720p and very comfortably fit within the allotted storage requirements. And I will share that detail with you also shortly. Please also make sure that your smartphone is, and these are kind of common sense things as well, that your smartphone or your camera is sufficiently well charged and there's enough of storage capacity. lest you record almost 80% and then realize you have to do a take all over again. In the case of speech and drama candidates, since this might involve movement and even acting for that matter, an on-camera view is recommended with the candidate's whole body in view. So just to be clear, if it's not just the candidate that you're recording, it's even the performance area if the candidate is going to move. So rather than have to move your camera with the candidate as they move, please choose a wide enough angle which covers probably about 3 or 4 feet on either side of the candidate so that we can see the entire movement area in one continuous take with no jerky movement. If you're uploading directly from a phone or a tablet, you probably need to compress the video first so that it meets with the various criteria. Of course, there are plenty of compression softwares for iPhone and the iOS family, as well as for Android as well. This is a little guidance about the video file size and the formats in which you can upload. So for the earlier grades, that's initial and 1, the limit size is 50 MB, which is quite substantial. And at the extreme end for diplomas, it's 350 MB. If you're wondering whether that is enough of space, just to give you an example, a 1-hour recording of a webinar is typically about 235 MB. So a 40-minute or 45 or 50-minute assessment should quite comfortably fit under 350 MB. And in case it doesn't, then you always have the option to export your file and compress it again. So your original file might be heavier, but for the purpose of uploading, you can compress it and choose the resolution so that it meets with these criteria. You're welcome to upload in an MP4 format or .mov format. If you're uploading any sort of image, then a JPEG or PNG format is also welcome. And of course, if you're supporting it with pieces of your prose or your poem or the necessary letter from someone, then a doc or docx or a PDF format is also welcome. So there's sufficient bandwidth also given on the formats. Please adhere to these formats because the server otherwise will not be able to support formats which are not mentioned here. So I think we've covered quite a lot for today, which is why I'm really looking forward to seeing you online. And I want to thank you for choosing Trinity College London. I now wish to open up the floor for questions so that we can happily clarify anything that you really would like to know about in connection with the Interim Digital Solution for June and July.